Chapter 5. An Amazing Find. Nancy, Bess, and George clawed their way to the surface. Bess had a red mark on her cheek, but said she was all right. To the girls' amazement, the wind had died down. "That was a freak blow," said Nancy. "What did we hit?" Bess asked. Her question was answered as the girls looked at the concrete marker on which a warning was painted in red. "Danger! Sunken schooner!" Quickly they righted the sailboat, but it was shipping water fast from the gouge in her side. "It'll sink!" Bess cried. Nancy did not comment. Instead, she looked under the deck, hoping to find extra rope so they could lash the sailboat to the post. To her relief, she discovered a coil of rope together with a heavy sweater. "Here, girls," she called, tossing the rope to them. "Try to tie top job to the post." Bess reached up to catch the rope, but her chilled fingers missed it. "Oh!" she cried out. "Never mind," said Nancy. She had succeeded in cramming the sweater into the hole. Now she dived to locate the rope. Nancy could not see it and had to surface. "I'll go down," George offered, but she too met with failure. Bess took a turn but came up empty-handed. The three girls went down again and again, but rose to the surface, panting, and had to rest for a few moments before submerging again. Once, when they came up, Bess remarked, "I think it's hopeless. There's a lot of mud down there." Soon George also gave up, but Nancy was persistent. "One more dive," she said, "then I'll quit too." This time, her groping hands found the rope on the deck of the schooner. Her lungs almost bursting, she made her way to the top of the water. As she grabbed the marker, Bess cried out, "You found it!" She and George took the rope and secured the mast of the sailboat to the marker. Bess was concerned about Nancy, who was shivering. "Are you all right?" she inquired. "I'll be okay in a few minutes," she replied. "The old lungs took a beating." George declared that hereafter, when they went sailing, they should carry skin diving equipment with them. The next second she cried out, "Oh, here comes someone in a Boston whaler!" To the girls' delight, the newcomer was Dick. "Gee, I'm sorry," he said. "When that sudden blow came up, I figured you might have some trouble." "You're a real lifesaver, Dick," Bess exclaimed gratefully. The girls pulled themselves into the whaler, while Dick anchored the sailboat. When he learned of Nancy's determination to save the craft, he shook his head in disbelief. "Boy, you're something," he said. "I don't think I'd have had the courage to try it." Nancy smiled. "Do me a big favor, Dick. Promise you won't tell a single soul about this." "Okay, Debbie. I'll have to report what happened to the sailboat, of course, but I'll keep your brave deed a secret." "Thanks," Nancy murmured. Dick added, "Don't feel bad about this. Even the best sailors have accidents. Frankly, I don't think the repair job on this wee Scot will be expensive." Nancy insisted she would pay for any damage, and Dick replied, "We'll see about that." When the girls reached the yacht club, Nancy quickly changed into a pink sports dress and then went to Mr. Ayer's office. She told him about the accident to the sailboat and insisted upon reimbursing the yacht club for necessary repairs. The manager smiled. "I see that your adventures in Waterford have already started." "I hope the others will have a happier ending," Nancy replied. "Mr. Ayer, I've heard about the whispering statue that was stolen from here. Where did it stand?" He said that it had been in the center of the narrow lawn at the front of the club facing the bay. "Were there any clues to the thieves?" the young detective queried. "None whatever. I have a feeling that the police gave up in despair, trying to find the thieves and the statue." Mr. Ayer said he himself had never seen the marble figure, since he had not come to the club until a year ago when it was ready to open. "I'm told the statue was very beautiful. Do you know the story about it?" Nancy repeated what Mrs. Merriam had said, that the statue looked like the wife of the original owner of the property, that she never overcame her homesickness of her native land, Italy, and that she had died while in her 20s. "Mr. Ayer, did you ever hear any stories on why the statue whispered?" "No, I never have," he chuckled. "Do you intend to try finding the marble lady?" "Yes, although I have another job to do for my father. but I'd like to see the exact spot where the statue stood. Would you mind showing it to me?" "Not at all." He led the way to the front lawn and pointed to an oversized flower urn containing petunias. "We covered the spot with this," he said, "but I suppose it's a poor substitute for a beautiful marble piece. The whispering statue would be a great addition to the yacht club. I wish you luck in trying to find it." As the manager excused himself to go back to his office, Bess and George joined Nancy. She told them what she had just learned and suggested that the girls make a thorough search of the area. The three friends separated and began a minute hunt for any telltale clues to the thief or thieves. Presently, Bess came across part of a torn letter under a stone, but it proved to be only an advertisement. Neither Nancy nor George found any clues. Finally, the searchers met in the flower garden. "I wonder who owns that land on the other side of the hedge," Nancy remarked. "Let's take a look over there." The girls walked to the far side of the garden and pushed their way through the tightly grown hedge. Just beyond stood a small building which they surmised had been used as a tool house. They headed for it. Finding the door unlocked, Nancy pulled it open. The hinges squeaked loudly. "Ugh, cobwebs," said Bess. The place was cluttered with broken tools and garden equipment, some of it piled on top of other broken pieces. "Surely," Bess remarked, "you don't expect to find a clue here." Nancy did not reply. Her keen eyes had detected something long and white propped in one corner and almost hidden by the debris. Pushing objects aside, Nancy made her way toward the corner. "Girls, this looks like a statue!" she exclaimed. Bess and George stepped forward and uncovered a dusty marble figure. Hardly daring to believe they had found the missing statue, they carefully turned the sculpture around. It was the life-size figure of a young woman. "It looks like you, Nancy!" Bess cried out. Nancy pulled off her wig, and the cousins stared first at her, then at the statue. "It certainly does," Bess added. "This must be the whispering statue," George added. "Only it isn't whispering." "Maybe," said Bess, "if we clean off all this dust, it will whisper." After staring at the marble piece, Nancy put her wig back on and said, "We are just guessing this is the stolen statue. The only person we know who can identify it is Mrs. Merriam. Let's go tell Mr. Ayer about our discovery, and then phone Mrs. Merriam to come over and look at the statue." On the way to the yacht club, the girls excitedly discussed their amazing find. "So it wasn't really stolen after all," Bess remarked. "But why would anybody hide the statue in that shed? And why didn't the police find it?" George suggested that possibly the thieves had not been able to sell the piece and had returned it rather than be caught with stolen property. "If so," said Nancy, "that must have happened after the police searched the area. The thieves probably were nearly caught when returning the statue and hid it in the shed." Mr. Ayer was astounded at the girls' news and immediately went with them to the shed. The manager said he would telephone Mrs. Merriam and ask her to come over. Fortunately, he found her at home with her husband, and the woman promised to drive to the club at once. Nancy suggested that she, Bess, and George go out on the beach during the woman's visit, since they were not supposed to be seen in her company. "I understand," the manager said. "After she leaves, I'll come to the beach and tell you what she had to say." The girls took a long walk along the sandy shore. As they returned to the area where the boats were docked, they saw Mr. Ayer coming in their direction. He was smiling. "Good news for you young detectives," he said. "Mrs. Merriam positively identified the marble piece in the shed as the whispering statue. I've already ordered workmen to give it a thorough cleaning, then to bring it over to the club. The big flower urn on the front lawn will be removed and the statue set in its original place." "Well, I'm glad that mystery is solved," said Bess. "Aren't you, Nancy?" Her friend did not reply at once. Finally, she said, "I wonder if it really has been solved." "What do you mean?" Bess asked. Nancy said, "I won't be satisfied until I hear the statue whisper." By the time the girls reached the shed, 2 workmen had brought the marble figure outside and were now loading it into the back of the club truck onto an old mattress. The girls were invited to go along and help steady the statue. The marble figure was taken to the area where cars were washed and given a bath. "She looks much better," George remarked, "but still she doesn't whisper." The sculpture was taken to the front lawn and set in place so that the young woman looked directly out over the bay. Still, there was not a sound from her. Bess asked, "Is she turned so she's facing exactly toward Italy? I'm sure she did originally." "I don't know," said one of the workmen. "Which way is Italy?" No one in the group was quite sure, so the statue was turned inch by inch. After a complete semicircle, there was still not a sound from the marble lady. "What difference does it make?" one of the workmen asked. "She's a beauty, and sure looks nice in front of the yacht club." The girls agreed, then walked off slowly and went to their bedroom to change for dinner. "Nancy, you've been so quiet," Bess remarked. "What's on your mind? Do you suspect that someone has tampered with the statue, and that's why it no longer whispers?" End of chapter 5.